Welcome to the Better Agent Podcast. If you're a real estate agent that's looking to grow your business, then you're in the right place. Whether you want to go from 5 to 10 transactions a year, or 10 to 50 transactions per year, or more, well, then this show is for you. I'm Josh Lavik, your host for the Better Agent Podcast, and in each episode, we'll bring you the tools, tips, and tricks directly from myself and some of the best leaders within the real estate industry. We have one goal in mind, and that's to boost your production and elevate your real estate game. Let's dive in and start creating a better real estate experience together. All right, welcome back to the Better Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lavik, and we are talking about growth in your real estate business. And so if you're an agent out there looking to grow from however many transactions you're doing to something more, hopefully this is the place for you, and you can learn some insight from our guests and myself and my 20 years in the real estate business. So I got a wonderful guest today with me, Robin St. Clair. She is also in my market, although a little bit further to the south. I believe you're based in more like Evansville area. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
That's correct. Okay. So although I had brought a client through to one of your listings recently, so we've definitely crossed paths and definitely seen each other throughout the real estate world in South Central Wisconsin here. But without further ado, Robin, if you wouldn't mind maybe just sharing a little bit more about you and your background and kind of what brought you here today.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me too. It's quite an honor. Yeah, like I have been born and raised in Wisconsin and just south of Madison. We're about 20 minutes south of the Beltline, so we're not too far out of the area. I started off 25 years ago as an appraiser, and I own my own appraisal company. I still do some appraisal work as well. And about 13 years ago, I jumped into sales, and it really gives you a different perspective on life and some job appreciation versus doing appraisals. So
Yeah.
I fell into it. I just love it. And it's just kind of snowballed from there.
So being an appraiser is definitely different than being a realtor. I mean, I know we obviously all have access. We both have access to the same data, right? The same MLS multiple listing system, right? We all look at properties and try to give price opinions, but I don't know, share with maybe some of our listeners may not know some of the differences, or what are some of the key differences between like a market value, a broker price opinion versus like an appraisal price opinion. Like what, tell us, I don't know, what's the difference between those two? How do you go about looking at it differently?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of differences. The appraisal industry has a lot different guidelines for us that realtors don't have to follow, and most of them don't know the guidelines because they're set by the lenders, if you're doing lender work specifically, or for banks. But for the most part, when you're looking at doing an actual appraisal versus a CMA or a broker price opinion, you're kind of looking for the highest price that a client can get because you're representing them. You want them to get the most that they can for their money. But the definition of an appraisal is the most fair and probable price that you're going to get for a property. And that means not necessarily the highest, right? That's why there's two sides to a transaction. You have a buyer side and a seller side. And that appraiser is supposed to should be somewhere in the middle between the two, theoretically, depending on who's right and what comps show. Yeah, we all have the same data, and we all analyze the same data differently.
Yeah.
Which is
right. We have different opinions, right? You have your opinion and I have my opinion, but they may or may not always be the same, huh?
Yeah, and that's why it might depend on what appraiser you get in your transaction too. So you can get different appraisal opinions. They're never all going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think, I remember there was a time, and this was back in 2008, 9, 10, I forget the exact year, but it was, the market was definitely shifting and sort of declining. But it was also, I remember a property I'd sold in a kind of a unique place in Madison, and it was kind of near like First Street, if you know where that is, but it was like sort of right on the edge of what could be maybe a higher value and a lower value. And I think at the time, I think we had an accepted offer at one price, and the appraisal came in like, gosh, I want to say it was like 70 or 80,000 less, significantly less. And the deal almost actually fell through, but I remember the seller just felt like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is priced fairly. And the agent thought they priced it fairly. And clearly they got an offer from a buyer. Well, then they ended up going to a different appraiser to get a different appraisal, to get another opinion, right? Like, well, geez, this one seems a little low. What if we try, getting a different appraisal, different opinion? Well, and then it came in at like, it was still a little bit less, but it was only like 20,000 or something, not nearly the 80,000 that it originally was. So it was, certainly can be different based on and time of the market too, and certain nuances within the area. I think that's certainly interesting.
Yeah, well, one thing that's interesting is we can see it on the MLS, and pretty much anybody can pull up the stats of prices that, rise and fall, and that goes month to month, right? The median sales price changes month to month. But if you do an appraisal in 1 month and then try to do the same appraisal a month later and have a homeowner try and tell you that there's no change in value, you can say, well, that's not true, because look at the market has changed, and it's always fluctuating. It shouldn't be that drastic in a 1 month time frame. And the appraiser should be following guidelines and be able to prove why they're coming up with the value that they're coming up with. And that's the biggest difference between an appraisal and a market analysis, is we have to be able to justify and prove exactly where those numbers are coming from. Whereas as a realtor, we're looking at those numbers and we're gauging the market. And a lot of times appraisers haven't been in those houses and they don't know those little things. So if you have a bad appraisal the first time around and you get the opportunity to have a second appraisal, you're going to try and give that appraiser different information and say, look, I know the last appraiser used this house, but I was in this house and it had all these different things that were wrong with it that maybe the appraiser didn't know. It's not listed on the MLS. If they aren't in the market going into these houses and seeing them on a regular basis, there's easy things to miss when you're going off of a piece of paper. So, we as an appraiser, you rely on third-party information for the most part.
Yeah.
Very heavily.
Yeah.
So there's, and when I got into sales, it's one thing I loved, because I could turn around as an appraiser and be like, I've been in 10 of these houses in this market. I know what's going on with these houses. So it did give me a kind of a good edge on my appraisal business as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not very common. I mean, I think most realtors that I know of, they're not also a licensed appraiser. So I think it's probably a little extra skill set that you bring to the equation for sure. I would think that's probably helped you along the way, I would think.
A few times, but I'm not gonna lie, I've had some not appraise out just like everybody else.
It's not always that. Yeah, just it doesn't always work out the way you want, for sure. Yeah. No kidding. Well, I love that conversation. So let's maybe shift gears though. I mean, so what, as you said, 13 years you've been in sales and you're loving it. I mean, what about, because I know the compensation model is a little bit different too, right? Going from paid per appraisal versus being paid per sale or per closing type of thing as a realtor. I mean, I don't know. How do you think you really made that jump in terms of growing your business, and what do you think where it was maybe, I don't know, if you think back to like one or two key times of your career over the last 13 years, what do you think, early on maybe were some of those key things that you did that really moved the needle and really helped pivot and catapult your business? What do you think anything that comes to mind?
Yep, 100%. When I first started into sales, I was just more or less doing friends and family and sphere of influence. And being an appraiser, I would get random calls. Can you sell this too? Things like that. And that's fine. I didn't really switch over to full-time sales until the interest rates dropped. I think it was about 3 years ago in August, and they went up to like 7-8%. So the refinance market dropped off completely. And I didn't realize it, but at the same time, I had slowly been ramping up the sales part of things. And I had 8 closings that July. Never even realized that in August I only did 2 appraisals. And it just didn't even click until about October. I was like, I'm not doing an appraisal every day like I normally would. I'm selling every day. And it was just this weird transition. And thank goodness, I had both to rely on. So it did flip flop without me ever really intentionally doing it. But it worked out good. Yeah.
But wait, you went from almost an appraisal a day, you said,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So there, it's interesting. There's a training program that our firm offers, and one of the things they tell you to do is do a market analysis every day, right? So
Yeah.
do an appraisal, right? Give a price opinion on at
Yeah.
least one property every single day. And if you
Oh, I
do
like
that,
that.
you will
Yeah.
totally improve your skills and your knowledge and insight about what's happening in the market, what's actually selling, what's not, and for how much. I mean, what a skill set that you just developed sort of naturally just by being an appraisal and in that market. And over time, you just kind of naturally made that shift, just like what you said. So that's a great, great thing to be aware of. I love that.
Yeah, definitely, especially for new agents coming into the market. Pricing houses is their biggest challenge and probably the thing that they lack the most confidence in. So for mentors out there or new agents, getting them on the computer, and I do this with some of the agents that I help mentor, is I just give them a random property, I pull it up and say, okay, go find all the information on this and pretend like you're sitting in front of the homeowner and you're gonna list it. So it's a really great exercise to just keep doing on a daily basis to get comfortable.
Totally. Well, I think it's a good exercise to do, and it's definitely a good skill set you want to be good at, right? I mean, if you're a good agent doing a lot of business, right, you're giving buyers advice on on the price and the offer they should make, and you're advising sellers of what you're going to list the property for, right? Like a good agent is going to be definitely well in tune with the market. That's for sure. So, what do you think? I guess can we go a little deeper on that? Is there something that you think is helpful to, maybe really, I don't know, speed up that, fast track that kind of insight or knowledge, or how you interpret looking at the market compared to someone else? Or any tools that come to mind that you think somebody should definitely check out?
One of the things that as an appraiser we use every day on the MLS, and it's accessible to all agents, is the market conditions addendum. And so when you pull a certain area up or pull the market up, you can go into the reports on I think it's on the right side, and there's a drop down box, and keep scrolling through all those different, it'll give you like the CMA and the agent full and customer full and all that. If you keep going down into, I think it's called special reports, there's a market conditions addendum, and that will give you a 12 or 24-month history. And it pulls up this nice little chart, and it shows you what the median sales price has been, what the median list price has been, and the days on market, all in one nice little page for whatever neighborhood you're pulling up. So that's really, really helpful. And actually that was developed back in, I think, 2008 to 10 range, when everything was shifting for appraisers. And the MLS put that in for us because it's part of our report that we have to have. It's really helpful for agents too, but no agents really know about it.
Well, there you go. The market conditions addendum. If you're not an appraiser, you may not know this exists, but it does exist, at least in our local MLS in South Central Wisconsin. So go in there, check it out, use it, and it can help you price properties even more. And I think what else is helpful is to know kind of what an appraiser is going to look at too, and use the data to look at that. So I think that's awesome. Definitely helpful. Very cool. Well, learn something today. There you go. All right. Tell me, let's maybe shift gears. How about some maybe challenges along the way? I mean, we all know the market was challenging in 08, 09, and 10. I think we're seeing maybe a different sort of challenge now, right? We've got definitely much higher interest rates, a little bit lower, still low inventory, but also, sales are maybe fewer than they were during COVID times. But I don't know. What do you think? Is there a time that it's something maybe you encountered a challenge throughout your career, and what you did to maybe overcome that challenge? Is there anything that maybe comes to mind for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I do a little bit differently than most realtors. So in Evansville specifically, and some of these surrounding towns, they're more rural. They're very laid back with their, I want to say, code enforcement, permits, things like that. They get a little bit more laxed the farther away from Madison you get. So we would always like list houses, and an agent would come in and have a home inspection done. And what happens at a home inspection? You're reopening up negotiations, And, they're finding all these little quirks and things. Well, this is a 200-year-old house. It's not going to be to code, but it's still got value, right? We're not going to discount $50,000 because the railings aren't spaced properly or whatever have you. So one of the things I started doing with most of my sellers, I give them the option, but I do strongly encourage it, is to just have a pre-inspection done before the listing. And that way we can fully disclose anything we know about the house, whether it's the code, whether you want to get it fixed, whatever it is. And we pre-inspect it. So we're putting it on the market. And I always tell sellers, like, how do I really know what your house is worth if I don't know what's wrong with it? And I don't know how any agent would know what their house is worth. There's always going to be some little cracks in the concrete, whatever. There's going to be something. Your house is not perfect. And that helps the seller kind of see that their house isn't exactly perfect. And then they can pick and choose on their terms what contractors or what they want to fix and what they want to disclose.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of been my biggest challenge down here and in the smaller towns. And it's worked out really well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's good advice. I think especially on older homes, right? Kind of that pre-1940, 1950, something like that, right? When you might have knotted tube in the walls or who knows what, right? Like you don't really know what you got. So like, I think just bringing peace of mind to probably both parties, right? To the seller. So they know like, hey, this, everything I'm marketing and selling and disclosing properly, everything there, or fixing something if it's truly a defect or something like that. But also for the buyers, right? Like what kind of peace of mind can it bring them to know that like, hey, this house has already been inspected. We've fixed the major issues and whatever it might be, definitely is a good idea. Definitely on certainly those older homes when can be a lot of question marks, right?
And the last thing the buyer wants is like a bunch of red tape and surprises 2 weeks after they fell in love with a house. So this way you can fall in love and know what's going on with it right from the start.
Yeah, for sure. Well, definitely. I love that. Well, cool. Well, we've I don't know, we've chatted about a bunch of different things. I don't know, anything jumping out at you that you think our listeners might really enjoy hearing about from that we haven't covered, or any topic on your mind that you think would be helpful in terms of growth? If an agent out there is listening and they're looking to grow their real estate business, anything else that comes to mind for you that you think our listeners might find valuable?
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of off the top of my head that doesn't get touched on a whole lot is when real estate agents work for builders or representing a buyer in a new construction home instead of an existing home. And there's a lot of people that would say, well, I don't need a realtor to work with the builder, but on both sides of the fence, for builders, it's really advantageous for most builders to work with a realtor that's a separate party for liability reasons, things like that, but also for the buyer to have advocacy during the building process too. So that's something I strongly encourage all of my buyers to, and my agents, to make sure that buyers and sellers know your worth in that transaction. There's definitely things that need to be watched over by a third party as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember a transaction and I was representing a buyer with a builder, right? And so maybe you might think the same thing, right? Maybe they didn't need representation in that, but they definitely, for the most part, felt comfortable with most of what the builder was telling them. But when there was an issue, when there was a discrepancy between what was disclosed and what was advertised, and even then when they came to building the property, then when there's a challenge, guess who stepped in?
Yep.
I did. Okay. Guess who negotiated through that resolution? Guess who ended up getting a concession for that buyer? I did. Okay. So I think that's when your value speaks, is when, it's fine if everything goes smooth, but if it doesn't go smooth, right, who's double checking everything to make sure that it does actually go smooth? I think that's a great point you bring up. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure you work with the right builders too, because there's a lot of realtors that will know who's a good builder and know who might not be good for you or a good fit for you in the long run.
For sure. Definitely. Okay. Well, cool. I appreciate you sharing all that. What about, because you do a decent amount of new construction, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
So if I was an
Maybe
agent
the
out
general
there and I was looking to
contractor.
maybe do more new construction, right? Maybe work with builders or maybe work with, some more of those types of builders. What do you think would be a good way to kind of get into that side of the business?
I think just networking and getting yourself out there, getting in front of the builders, maybe even the subcontractors. If you have different networking groups that you can join to start introducing yourself and showing your work to those builders, that would be, I guess, my advice to anybody coming in is it
Like
is
through the
good.
Builders Association or something else?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them around Madison, even just any networking groups in general,
Sure.
that are business oriented might lead you down those right paths.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because right, builders are not necessarily always the best marketers. They might be great builders, but right, you're bringing that marketing and advertising expertise, right, and dealing with some of that
Yeah.
aspect of packaging the home. So I love that for sure. Well, there
Well,
you go, guys. If you want to work more with builders and do new construction, get out there and network in front of them and get involved. It's no different than building your business in general, right? Like if you're just looking to work with more potential buyers and sellers, right? Part of, you can do the same exact thing and just adding those people to your database to stay in touch with them and stay top of mind about how to, whether they're looking to buy or sell. I think that's something I've done for years, just building my own business, right? And it's just, to me, it's just always adding to the database and people that you're nurturing and staying in touch with about the market and what's happening. The more you build that, it may take some time up front, but if you're doing it a little bit every single day, then suddenly, boom, you got a pretty booming business. That's for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. All right, Robin. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on our show and sharing some more of your insight about your real estate business and difference between appraisals and market value and CMAs versus the difference, and obviously sharing some challenges about the rural markets and working with new builders and things like that. So I really appreciate you coming on our show, the Better Agent Podcast. So hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've found some nuggets from our conversation today. And if you're an agent out there looking to also grow your business, then hopefully you tune in next time as we interview other top agents in our market and around the area that also can share some of their insight over the years. Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right. Well, thanks, Robin. Thanks again. And again, this is the Better Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lavik. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to the Better Agent Podcast. I hope you found today's insights valuable. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for more tips, Q&A sessions, and sneak peeks into our 21-day challenge. To get full access of our show notes and more details on the 21-day challenge, go to abetterrealestateexperience.com. Keep striving for greatness, and I'll see you on the next episode.